Thank you guys for joining us today. We're here to talk more than anything about the legacy of Chaminade and the various aspects of what that expression means. So I thought the best way to start out would be just to kind of go around the room and get your reaction to the following. When you talk about Chaminade, outside of Chaminade, the first thing you hear almost always is, wow, that school has such a great reputation. What is Chaminade's reputation in your mind? What are we known for? What is our reputation? What have we crafted here over the last 90 or so years?
Well, I'll say one thing. When I was still in grade school, all my friends wanted to come here. And I had never heard of the school or anything like that. And what little they knew, they filled me in. And they said, it's a school where you really have to work hard, and it has a very good academic reputation. So the first thing that I ever heard about was its academics and how important that was. And of course, that scared me because I didn't consider myself a great student, but I found it challenging, but not super difficult.
I've met a number of grandparents. I give talks at the Malloy Institute for Lifelong Learning, and the average age is around 60. They're all academic professionals, and they're all retired. So once in a while, they'll come up and talk to me about their grandchildren at Chaminade or their sons at Chaminade. And so the first thing they'll always mention is the academics. Once in a while, they'll mention the spiritual experience. I won't say ages ago, but a long time ago, a number of people would talk about the sports. You know, sports, we were like a super football team, a super this, that, and the other thing. So that certainly was in the mind of a number of kids, that this is a great sports school. But in the minds of the adults, the academics come first, at least what I see, and I see now. And then secondly would come the religious experience. Like there's a strong religious presence in the school.
Yeah, I think the religious presence is important. Sometimes it gets translated, you might say, as to developing character in the young men. You know, that you do the right thing at the right time, the right place, that whole business there. That it has a reputation for building character and people who have gone forth into different industries and commitments, government, and like that.
We had lived upstate for a number of years when I was young. And when we moved back here to New York, I was in the 7th grade and graduated then from St. Bridget's, but I had only been in that school for 1 year. And as a result, I didn't know anything about any of the Catholic high schools, but I wanted to go to one of them. I had gone mostly through Catholic education as I was growing up. And when I was in the 8th grade, my mother heard of Chaminade. I had never heard of the school before. And I applied, got accepted, and that has been the rest of my life. I went to Chaminade, became a brother right after I graduated, and when I finished my training as a brother, I had majored in German at the University of Dayton, which is a Marianist school. And lo and behold, they needed a German teacher here at Chaminade. So I got assigned right back here, and it's been the rest of my life.
Now, as a student, you had an experience that's very similar to so many, to my experience, many other people in this room, that in the time that you were here, you felt something, you saw something, you experienced something that was meaningful enough to you that you didn't have much hesitation devoting the rest of your life to that.
Well, it was, I think, more, it was the influence, the friendship of the brothers that were here. They made a very, very great impression on me, and I wanted to be part of that.
And I think that's an experience that so many students have, not necessarily to the degree of becoming a Marianist, of course, but so many students show up here as freshmen and they're worried about getting in trouble discipline-wise, or they see a bunch of guys in these black suits, and that can be kind of intimidating, like a Secret Service or the Men in Black or something, right? And then at some point it flips, right? At some point these people become your friends. They become people that you want to do right by, that you're so. I still remember coming back after getting my first job as a writer and telling Brother George Zenley, hey, I made it. I got a job as a writer. I was more excited to tell him than to tell my own father, because how do you guys, and from the province of Maribe here, how do you craft that relationship with the students here that keeps our legacy sort of intact and impactful? Sure, Brother Larry.
Well, I always would say, if you can't teach at Chaminade, you can't teach anywhere, right? And the reason I would say that is not only are the students intelligent, all right, but they're also curious and enthusiastic. I never had trouble in any organization I ever ran, never had trouble getting people to come. All right. At one point, the Social Studies Club was 700 members.
Wow.
All right. And it's simply the enthusiasm of the kids. So if you offer a good product, which we do academically and we do spiritually and everything else, but our activities go way beyond, the sports. So I mentioned sports a little while ago, but our activities are very, very well known. And that attracts a kid. So when it comes to an open house, you'll have as many people stopping at the various, I don't know if they still do booths, but they're stopping at the various booths that are not athletic. When the first time we ever did that, I figured, okay, who's going to stop at the Social Studies Club booth? Not a problem. Always a mob. Or the clubs, any club, always a mob. Because the students are not just academic. They're enthusiastic about life. And if you show some professionalism, some enthusiasm, they join you right away. So it's easy. I always found it very easy to get people involved in class, very easy to get people involved in the activities, because I'm dealing with a pretty good product. I just have to, tweak it a bit. That's all I have to do. Mm-hmm. Very easy. I first started teaching at St. James Chester, and the students were not academically oriented. So the approach had to be radically different. The enthusiasm was there because they were young, but everything had to be different because they really didn't have the academic background that you could work on to go to the next level.
I think also, I've influenced students by preaching, maybe, by teaching, but the most influence I think I've had on students over the years as a moderator of woodworking club for some 40 years or so. And what happens there and in other just activities or after school, they begin to see that you're not all wholly, totally distant from them. I can't talk to you because you don't sin or anything like that, which is not true. And to break through that barrier, so begin to see them as a human person. And that's why I think Brother Riz is so attractive to the kids, because he's always very down to earth and no pretension.
Pat, you asked the the question, how do you craft that? And I don't really think it's a question of trying to craft it. I think that for all of us, it's always been just being ourselves. And as a result, attracting kids, becoming friends, and spending time with the kids.
And that's really one thing that makes Chaminade unique is that opportunity to spend that time. You know, the fact that you guys live here, you live like the building that we're in right now is the residence, and it's connected to the school. I didn't have to go outside to get here. The fact that you're ever present here. You've mentioned to me, Brother Larry, we've been on retreats together and such
Right.
over the years of even, you know, people knocking on the door, you know, in the middle of the night sometimes with whatever faith crisis or whatever might be going on. Being able to be here and be present for the Chaminade family has quite an impact. Can you guys kind of speak to that, or can you think of any examples whereby, you know, maybe it's somebody that hasn't been, you know, even or graduated a long time ago and came back to campus. The idea that Chaminade looks totally different than it did 60, 70, 80 years ago. We've expanded. We've been blessed to do so well in so many different areas. But, you know, nonetheless, even tonight, right? If God forbid I found myself in some sort of crisis, I know that I could come and knock on the door just like any of my graduates from 20 years ago. Please.
Well, strange you should mention that, because just yesterday, parents of a fellow who graduated maybe 35, 40 years ago called me up and said, can we come over and talk? Which was, I mean, amazing. How many schools in the nation? Now, it's not just me. I mean, many of the brothers get the same thing. But along the lines of what you're talking about, that just happened yesterday. So I went down, we talked for about 2 hours, we worked out the problem, and they went home. Well, after they visited chapel, then they went home. How many schools in the nation do that? All right, have people present, and it'd be the same with lay teachers. Someone could come up after after school and say, "Could I talk to you?" And you're available. You're available. Nobody punches the clock, right? There's no such thing as Chaminade. You don't punch the clock. If we ever paid you for the overtime work that you do, we'd be bankrupt, right? And that's the whole faculty. That's the whole faculty. And when a person becomes a member of the Chaminade faculty, they know they're in it for life. You know, they know this is it. I'm going to be as available. I mean, obviously you got families, but I'm going to be as available as I possibly can, because this is the norm in Chaminade, to be available to our clientele, and not just students or everybody. These people whose son graduated 40 years ago. Why would they call Chaminade?
Exactly.
I had a very sad experience about 2 Saturdays ago. A graduate of class of 2002 and his wife lost a little boy who was 4 years old to cancer within 6 months, and they saw the little boy go from a lively little boy to a very sad death. And I was very appreciative they called me, and that happens a lot, most so because of clerics. We are involved in baptisms and weddings and funerals, and they very often would want any of our priests, to be there for that occasion.
And in a similar way, obviously, on the other side of the coin, so many graduates, there are graduates that you may not hear from for 5, 10, 15 years, and then call you up, hey, would you be willing to, say my wedding, right? Or you guys are constantly getting invited to people's weddings, baptisms, family events.
Yep.
I had Marianists at my wedding. That's a real family. It's easy to say, hey, we're a family, right? A lot of schools say, oh yeah, join the family, right? But to take a sports organization, they say like once a Nick, always a Nick. But are you really in the Knicks family?
Yeah.
Am I getting invited to Carmelo Anthony's wedding? No, right? Yeah. So what's different about the way that we do things here, about the way that you do things, that when we say family, we mean it? We're gonna turn in times of great joy and great sorrow. We're gonna turn, always back to you guys as graduates, as members of the Chaminade family.
I think it has to do with the way we relate with one another as teachers, but also as teachers with the students. There's so much to be said for, let's say, an alumni gathering, which we have every year. Every year we have a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year reunion, and they're delightful to go to. Although I'm always afraid, because how am I going to remember the names? You don't have to worry about that, because they come, the grads come right up to you, and they're anxious, they're happy to see you. And inevitably, some story of what you did, or the time that you did this, or remember when Joe did that, and it's delightful, and people sense that we really do care individually about them. The fact is, it's still in our memory, all the things that happened, and that's one of the great things, is that no matter how long you've been out of the school, you're still in the school.
I think it takes
Exactly.
some kids a couple years to appreciate that, because the graduates will come back and say, okay, I graduated from Chaminade, that was fine and everything else, but I never thought I was going to go back. Then all of a sudden they're there. Mm-hmm. And it's a maturation process. In other words, once they go through college or graduate school into real life, then they'd say, you know, when did I really feel that I belonged to something bigger than myself? And it's Chaminade. And it's not just the faculty, it's one another. Right? Like the other night at the basketball game, you had the incoming 8th graders and you had the seniors. Well, it wasn't the seniors and the incoming 8th graders. They mixed them together. And they were all screaming and yelling at the same time. So if I'm an 8th grader, I'm going to be really impressed. Not that we lost the game, but I'm going to be really impressed that, you know, they care about me. They didn't just give me a Chaminade shirt. Okay, I would have been impressed with that. Getting something free,
Sure.
Right? Chaminade shirt. But then they walked me into a place where everybody was together, and there was no distinction between the upper class and the lower class. I'm sure any activity I've run, activities you've run, I would never allow seniors, freshmen. There's no such thing. You're members of this activity, period. If there's senior, freshman, senior, you're out. You're out. I won't take you. It's got to be the family. So you don't pull that off. And we don't. Check any activity you want, and there's no distinction. I mean, you might wear a white sweater or something, but that's fine. But in reality, it's a family.
And along those lines, one thing that always stuck with me, Mr. Paul is principal now, but for the entire rest of the time that I've worked here, Brother Joe was principal, and I was always struck by, the fact, like, for example, if you're principal for a couple decades, unfortunately, some negative things will happen, and there, some accidents and, tragic deaths. But Brother Joe remembers these events and these days off the top of his head, much like a parent, not, oh, there's a list in my office drawer, or, I'm going to pray for these people. It's not in his desk, it's in his heart. And it's not just Brother Joe. That I'll never forget that moment of realization that he feels the same way about a kid getting sick or unfortunately a student passing away that I would feel if it were my own, like genuinely the same love and the same pain. How do we get to that point as like how do we build family like that? Because when it's real family, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
It's blood.
Well, we cheat a little bit. We're religious, right? So we're brought up through our education that why are we brothers? To live for other people. That's it, right? So, I mean, if I'm not going to associate, if I'm not going to care, why am I brother? And then it's passed on to the lay faculty. They pick that up right away. Okay, why am I at Chaminade? Again, I'm not punching a clock. Why am I at Chaminade? Because I've got someone I have to care about. This is an extended family. So with us, our whole formation teaches us to live as a community, to care about other people. Why else would you be a brother if you're not going to care about somebody else? So we don't even think that. It's just automatic. We care for other people. The trick is to try to instill that into somebody else. So the incoming 8th graders, We have to tell them they belong, but they belong to each other. So when I used to have a homeroom, I'd start off by saying, this is our homeroom. Look around at the guys. Some of them look ugly. Some of them look stupid. But this is your group for 4 years. So this is your family. And that's the way we're going to act as a homeroom. And if you don't act that way, I don't want you in this homeroom.
You know, there's one of the things that I'm always impressed by, even from when I was a student, back in the really old days, in the 60s when I was a student here, they actually used to use seniors as study hall moderators, believe it or not. And I still remember the fellow who was my study hall moderator. His name was Bill Lano. I still remember him. I think, Brother Richard, you remember him too. He was a wonderful kid, big football player, had a terrible complexion, but he was so mature, and we were all a bunch of, dumb little freshmen, being crazy, and all he had to do was just sort of like look at us, and we would sort of like know our place. But he would always wait and then talk to us as we would leave out. And the same thing is true today. Now we have the guys, we call them senior leaders, and all the freshman homerooms have seniors. They're usually 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 seniors who go to that homeroom almost every day, and the idea is to interact. Sometimes if they have a project to do, they may be too interested in getting that finished or whatever, but most of the time there's an interaction that's going on, and I think that's great. And so as far as I know, most of the underclassmen they're not afraid of upperclassmen. In fact, they welcome the upperclassmen because they've generally had such positive experiences with them, and that's a pretty cool thing.
Now, I don't want you to get the idea that the school is perfect, all right? We know it's not perfect. We know there's bullying, but it's not tolerated. It's not tolerated by the students. It's not tolerated by the faculty. So I don't know where this video is going to go, but this is not a propaganda video. We are not perfect, but we know what has to be done, and we're backed up by the student body. So if we have to correct a kid because he's a bully, the student body is going to back us up on that.
And now, Brother Larry, you in particular have done a lot of work with freshmen. So you've encountered situations, and freshmen are unique because not only do you have to deal with there's much older, sometimes much bigger juniors, seniors in the school. You also have to deal with the challenge of kind of integrating them into the Chaminade family. That's kind of like step one, is that day one of 3C week or day one of homeroom. How do you kind of go about that process?
Pretty easy. I walk up and down the aisles every day, and I say, what activity are you in? And every student within 2 weeks had better be in an activity or I'll put them in one. So I'll find out what they're interested in. I'll say, okay, here's the person you go to for this. You like ETV studio? This is where you go. You like chess club? Here's where you go. And they're coming in with interests. You just have to find out what their interest is and then direct them to the place where they can, do something. And at the end of the year, I'll say, okay, take out a piece of paper, write down all the activities that you're getting awards for. And the average kid will have 4 activities.
Wow.
But you got to do it. You got to say, this is important that the kid gets involved. And particularly freshmen. If they don't get involved, they're going to leave the school. They've got to be involved. So you, as an adult, have to say, okay, it's my job to lead them, get them involved. I used to run the hiking club, okay? And in the old days when there were hardly any cars on the road, Model T Fords and so forth, it'd be easy to walk the roads, okay? There was one time I walked from Chaminade to Mariba with 98 kids. How do you get 98 kids to walk 20 miles? You simply say, want a challenge? We're going to leave at this time, bring some food, bring some Band-Aids, going out to Mariba, and we're coming back. Now, the next week, I wouldn't have 98 kids, right? It'd be down to about 60. But I specifically went after the kids that I knew would not be taken in football. In other words, I knew they didn't have, the physical qualities to be in a really difficult sport. But try walking 70 miles in one day.
Yeah.
I'll take that kid over a football player.
For sure.
Right? So all of us do that. You go out to the kid and you say, what can he do? How can I make him happy and feel part of Chaminade? And you bring him into your activity in the classroom. I often feel like a vampire. I steal their energy, right? And then I try to give it back to them.
That's a good way of putting it.
I think also we invite them to service, with different organizations. And we're setting up our St. Joseph Mission 20. So 20 years ago.
Is it the 20 years?
Yeah, wow. Kind of our luck. Last minute we asked, 12 kids from here, 12 kids from Kellerberg, do you want to come down to New Orleans and help rebuild homes? They were in the woodworking club. Everyone said yes and went for the whole week, and they enjoyed it. They just glow in serving, because that's what God designed us to do, to serve other people, and they made so many good friends down there, and we went down for 7 years, and along came Sandy, and we changed our orientation.
And in the woodworking club, you've had such a positive impact on so many students just by teaching them that craft. I can't tell you how many of my friends that I graduated with think of you all the time, when something pops up around the house or something needs to be fixed. I also have a number of friends, myself among them, that, sometimes around the house when things aren't going quite right and you can't get the door back on the hinge, really wish that, we had taken advantage of the woodworking club. How does that make you feel to kind of know that every day, somewhere in this country, there's a former woodworking club kid doing something around the house that he only knows because of you?
And then they pass it on, So Mr. Daniel Hasselbauer, he's the best woodworker I've ever had, and he's now moderator of the club. Brian Johnson, class of 15, became an architect, and we wanted to build a 20 by 80 shed for the Sisters of Life up in Suffern. He designed it, and broke it down into 8-foot by 8-foot sections that we built down here, and then shipped them up. So it's a wonderful feeling. I praise the Lord. Thank God for that.
Sure.
And Father's still working with Habitat for Humanity, and involving. I don't know if you get the kids, but the kids work with you, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's a little harder.
And who was it that got involved with a fellow who was building tree houses?
That's Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson? Yeah.
So he graduated, and then after college, he apprenticed with this guy on television who builds tree houses. I've never seen them. They're not little tree houses.
Sure, yeah.
These are real houses.
Yeah. And then he went on to become an architect.
Huh. You want to live in a treehouse?
Depends on how much the rent is. Now, one thing that the four of you all have in common, and this is true for most Marianist educators that I had, if not all. So one of my good buddies that I graduated from here with, we were actually roommates in college, Nick. He said, I'll never forget him saying this, the thing about this is when I went back to work here. The thing about Chaminade is it's the only place I've ever been where every single day I laughed at least once to the point that it almost brought me to tears. And, when you look at you talked about the academic reputation, and that's thanks to you guys and the work that you've done in the classroom, but I can also think, I can think of a famous, situation that happened when a kid fell off his crutches in Brother Larry's class when I was a student, and my brother had Brother Rob for English. He sometimes quotes some of the funnier things that happened in class, Great Expectations, and the stories go on and on, right? We were talking to Dick Kearns a couple of you told me the story about with the penny loafers, right? So I think that's really what makes Chaminade unique, the sense that we can have a sense of discipline and a strict dress code, and I shaved for this last night, right? But at the same point, you can also look back on it and say, wow, that I've never laughed more anywhere. That there's and laughter is really, that's really the purest expression of joy, right? So how do we kind of it's really tough, especially with teenage boys, right? To kind of educate them, both academically, but also in terms of here's how you dress, you know, when you're going on an on-camera interview, right? But then there's that other side to it that speaks to the heart and to the, like, how do you develop that in the classroom, which I think is part of the reason why a lot of students will then turn around and come to hiking club, come to woodworking, you know, because they can see more than, you know, you're not just reading from a textbook in there. How do you guys kind of develop that classroom environment that allows for us to kind of go beyond the academics, get to know you as people, and then kind of opens up the door for that deep, true relationship that really is the impact of Chaminade?
Well, I think as a teacher, when you're starting off, you have to find your voice. That's a writing term, I guess. You know, how much chaos can you allow? Are you going to be really super strict, or can you be, my class, like 5 seconds from chaos all the time? And if you really get into find your voice, it's like play. It's like playing a game, and it's fun. And you want you don't want to be dull for 35 minutes or an hour. You want to have a couple of things there that will, you know, be funny. That, you know, something may happen, or some kids will say something, or you'll say something just to, you know, break up the monotony of what it is.
Just don't take yourself so seriously. All right. I had an adult tell me the other day, it's horrible to get old. I said, I'm having fun. Why aren't you having fun? All right, because, I mean, everybody's going to get old. When you're young, you have problems. When you're old, you have problems. When you're middle-aged, you have problems. You're always going to have problems. So what's your attitude toward that? You can go in a corner and cry. You can yell, this isn't fair. You can just relax, don't take yourself seriously, and say, okay, go with the flow. Go with the flow. And I think living in a religious community, we kind of, you know, get after one another and try to see the funny parts of our lives. And then it's just naturally going to take over into the classroom. We're not going to take ourselves so seriously that, oh, wow, you challenged me. Big deal. You're supposed to challenge. Now I have to teach you how to properly challenge, but you're supposed to challenge me. Why should I be threatened by that? So just relax. Don't be threatened.
Pat, I think it also has a lot to do with what kind of an atmosphere do we create here in the school that, number one, kids want to be part of, that number two, they can have fun in, even though they're working at the same time, even though they're taking tests, avoiding demerits, things like that. But basically, it's a fun experience. And we have to create that atmosphere. And I think that we do it very, very naturally.
Yeah, do you think that part of that is, this is presumptuous on my part, but it seems to me, especially as a student, it seems like you guys kind of have a good time, you know, like living here in the province. Like, it seems like you genuinely like one another and you genuinely pursue interests.
We don't want to push that too much.
I'm always calling Brother Richard my friend, and he says, who's your friend? And I said, you are. And he says, I don't see him. We have a really good time together.
But that must translate, I think there's something there to the idea of, you guys are all a bunch of guys living here together, and then you go over to the school, and they're younger, right? But that's just another, it's a whole bunch of guys, right? How important do you think it has been over the last, 90, 95 years that we've had that single-sex education, the single male, and then we're also, you guys are also, like, I think that definitely impacts the understanding of kind of male-male friendship, that community building, and that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, I taught at Kellenberg for 3 years, and that my only co-ed teaching experience. And it's very, very different. But when you have all guys, they don't have to be preening themselves to look good before the girls. They don't have to get dressed up and all like that. And you can say things and do things that I wouldn't have done in a co-ed classroom. It's like a camaraderie in a positive sense.
And there's almost a sense of trust there, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to pull back. I notice in some schools with male and female, the girls will take over, and the boys will pull back. And you don't have to do that at Chaminade.
It's like married life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly matches my experience. Along similar lines, sometimes, if everybody gets stressed out about work or sometimes feels overburdened, right? My wife will say to me sometimes, just, try to remind me, hey, it's just a job. But it's not, right? There's something more here. One thing I was talking to Brian Crimmins about a couple weeks ago, the idea that more so than anything, if things were to go wrong for me here, the worst part about it would be feeling that I let down the Marianists, that I let you guys down. Are you guys conscious of that idea that, maybe I'm a little bit of an exception because I came back to work here, right? But so many graduates want more than anything for you guys just to be proud of us. Are you guys conscious of that feeling that kind of exists?
I
Yeah.
am, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the reverse side of it is when a graduate has not done well in whatever area, and they do come back, but they're almost a little hesitant. I'm not perfect. Do you still accept me? And of course we do. And when we meet our woundedness meets their woundedness, that's what cross is all about, so that side of it too.
And I think that's what I think every Chaminade grad, we all know how we feel about you, right? Like that idea that we want you to be proud. How do you feel about us?
Well, we want you to succeed, but as a whole person, all right? In other words, I don't care if you're the head of the company, but I want you to be happy in the company. And I want you to be working as hard as you possibly can in the company, right? So I don't care how talented you think you are, but what are you doing with your talents? To me, that's important. I had one kid, his intellect was off the charts. Okay, all he wanted to do was run a tugboat. So he did. He became a tugboat captain.
Wow.
All right, now I'm disappointed in that, but he's happy. Okay, that's what counts. He's a good father, good husband, having fun running tugboats, but he's got like 170 IQ. I don't think it takes you that much to run a tugboat, but I would never, say you're wasting your talent. I would simply say, are you doing the best you can as a tugboat captain, and are you happy? If the answer is yes, then I'm happy.
Yeah, I remember one fellow who I had taught. I think it was back in the 80s. I think it was, who when he came back to reunions, and actually he didn't really come to the he wasn't going to come to the reunion. He had shown up earlier, and said, "Well, I don't know if I want to come to the reunion. I'm not as financially successful like there are so many lawyers and doctors and architects and all that. I haven't made a lot of money." I said, his name was John. I said, "John, from what you've told me, your family is a great family. You have a really nice wife, a wonderful wife, a passel of kids, and they love to see you come home, and you love to go home to them, and it's a great family experience." I said, "How could you possibly think that your life hasn't been successful? It has nothing to do with how much money you have in your wallet. It has what you have in your heart." And he was by all possible stretches of the imagination a successful person, but he wouldn't realize it. He didn't realize it, until I told him that, and he mused about it. He said, I think you're right."
I think it's a great example. Brother Richard, do you have anything?
Well, another example that I thought of was kid who was sort of a bandit when he was here. We have many of them. And
It's a Father Ernie word.
that's correct. Yeah. But he was. And he started a brewery. And he runs a brewery now. And whenever there's an alumni event, he provides, at no charge to Chaminade, all of the beer. And he says, this is the way I can give back to Chaminade.
So this has been a really great discussion. I want to close with this. You guys, because of the decades that you've devoted to this place, you can see simply by looking out the windows here, this beautiful room, the impact that Chaminade has had. Right? We've gone from a basic school building over there to the block campus that we have here with our fields, and now expanding even to other corners of Mineola, quite literally. It's a twofold question. Looking at and then you think about the personal impacts, the graduates, the stories that we've told here, right? The generosity that so many of our alumni have shown towards the school, the growing endowments. The impact that Chaminade has had is clear in its graduates, in its facilities. Moving forward, what has the impact of Chaminade been? But also, what do you see? As we approach our 100th anniversary here, what has our impact been, but also what will the impact be? Because, and you must take great pride in the statements, but it looks like Chaminade's never been stronger. We just seem to be growing and growing and growing and doing more and more and more, and obviously producing more graduates.
I think the impact is going to be, from one point of view, I think Chaminade is more important now than it's ever been, because the challenges to our student body, the challenges to their family, the challenges to our nation are incredible. And I'm almost sad that I'm not teaching anymore, because I'd like to work through those challenges with the kids. But thanks be to God, we've got a school that has a very strong, positive, deeply involved lay faculty. We don't have that many brothers, all right? Hopefully we'll recruit some brothers. But we've got a solid faculty that cares. So the impact is not going to change, but it's needed even more, I think, today.
I think looking back, I've been part of Chaminade for 57 years, and there's always been a strong legacy of leadership. So Brother Alexander Ott, who was teaching in our Holy Trinity School in Brooklyn, wanted to start a school someplace in the suburbs. So he looked up in Westchester, New Jersey, all around here, and came to this potato field with great prescience, because right on Jericho Turnpike we have a bus line, and 3 or 4 blocks away we have the train station, where now 250 kids come to that. Then we had Brother John Darby, who built the Greater Chaminade here. And then, Brother Tom and the APs led us into the internet digital world, as well as sailing us through COVID, which was a tremendous challenge. And now we have our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Brian Crimmins, has a great vision of where we're going to go, and that to me is wonderful, and it's going to be beneficial to so many people, because there aren't many Catholic schools anymore, and that's a great blessing. And I'm glad somebody can imagine all those things and create them. It's a beautiful gift.
I think it's one of the things that you, or we, don't really plan. Possibilities come up, and we take advantage of them, and, well, that gave us the swimming pool. And I've seen all of this since the original, well, not quite the original, but almost the original building was here. The swimming pool wing, the AAC, the stadium, the retreat house. Well, first of all, Mariba, Founders Hollow.
Start.
The
Saragossa.
Saragossa. The name wasn't coming. You know, when you get old, the names don't come quickly. Yeah, the science building, and God only knows what's going to be coming after this. There are things that we've talked about. Are they going to happen? Who knows? But one of the things that Chaminade never does is it doesn't surprise you.
Why do you say that?
Because all of these new things come. Don't be surprised at what happens.
Expect the unexpected.
Yeah, Father, one of our now deceased Marianists, Father Philip, used to have a saying that I think he borrowed from somebody, but it worked so well, and it was that every successful enterprise, is a result of people with enthusiasm. It's a triumph of enthusiasm, and when people go through our school, when the guys go through our school, and they have a positive experience, that they want to make sure that others have the same experience. So we've been so fortunate. Our alums have been so generous in the way that they support the school. We have access for all going on now, and a lot of funding has come in for people who definitely can do the work at Chaminade, but just don't have the financial wherewithal. And that enthusiasm is just, it tends to snowball. And when you're with somebody who's enthusiastic, you can do almost anything, Eons ago, when I built the pipe organ in the auditorium, and when I first did it, I was a little hesitant because I didn't know a heck of a lot, and I was depending upon some of my friends to help me out and all that. But Father Philip, he said, "Oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to help you with it." So he and Brother Ken, who's now the principal over at Kellenberg, the two of them work with me and the fellows who are working with me, and we built organ chambers in the auditorium. I was shocked, and every time I think back on that, which was now quite a while ago, wow, people who have a vision, and that's where we've had a lot of success here, because we have people that have vision. Brother Tom has vision. Father Philip had vision. Brother Ken has vision. And with their enthusiasm, you just want to say, "How can I help? How can I help?"
Well, I think it's
Great thing.
I think it's just that desire to be a part of it, to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And more than anything, I really think that's what Chaminade. That to me is the impact of Chaminade. It's a family. It's in every sense of the word. You're a part of something greater than yourself. I think that's the commonality when we talk about these classrooms, you talk about these clubs, to be a part of something greater than yourself. Is there anything else about Chaminade or the Chaminade experience that I've left out? Well, I prepared pretty thoroughly, so.
I'm sure there is, but I can't think of it.
I did. I tried. Thank you guys for doing this, and more than anything, thank you for building this and dedicating your lives to this, because it makes it a lot easier for us to dedicate our lives to it, and there can be, in my mind, no greater entity to devote your time and your heart and your life to. So thank you for building what you built, and we'll do what we can to push it forward here over the next couple decades. All right.